Baseball in Canada dates back to the 19th century and is played at various levels of competition throughout the country. There is currently one major league team, the Toronto Blue Jays, founded in 1977, Canada's first major league team, the Montreal Expos, formed in 1969, relocated to Washington, D.C. in 2005. Around 75 Canadian cities and towns have been home to minor league baseball teams. There is currently one MLB-affiliated minor league team, the Vancouver Canadians of the Class A Northwest League, an affiliate of the Blue Jays. There are also several independent league teams in Canada, playing in the Frontier League and the American Association. Notable amateur leagues include the Inter-County Baseball League in Ontario, Ligue de Baseball Major du Québec in Quebec, and the Collegiate Western Canadian Baseball League in Alberta and Saskatchewan. There are additionally amateur-level baseball teams playing in each province in the summer months under the auspices of Baseball Canada. Several American-based collegiate leagues have teams in Canada. The Montreal Expos were a Canadian professional baseball team based in Montreal, Quebec. The Expos were the first Major League Baseball franchise located outside the United States. They played in the National League East Division from 1969 until 2004. Following the 2004 season, the franchise relocated to Washington, D.C., and became the Washington Nationals. Immediately after the minor league AAA Montreal Royals folded in 1960, political leaders in Montreal sought an MLB franchise, and when the National League evaluated expansion candidates for the 1969 season, it awarded a team to Montreal. Named after the Expo 67 World's Fair, the Expos originally played at Jarry Park Stadium before moving to Olympic Stadium in 1977. The Expos failed to post a winning record in any of their first 10 seasons. The team won its only division title in the strike-shortened 1981 season, but lost the 1981 National League Championship Series to the Los Angeles Dodgers. The team was sold in 1991 by its majority, founding owner, Charles Bronfman, to a consortium headed by Claude Brochu. Philippe Lou was promoted to the team's field manager in '92, becoming MLB's first Dominican-born manager. He led the team to 4 winning seasons, including '94, where the Expos had the best record in baseball before a player's strike ended the season. Lou became the Expos leader in games managed at 1,409. The aftermath of the '94 strike initiated a downward spiral as the Expos chose to sell off their best players, and attendance and interest in the team declined. Following a failed attempt to disband the Expos, Major League Baseball purchased the team prior to the 2002 season after the club failed to secure funding for a new ballpark. In their final 2 seasons, the team played 22 home games each year at Hiram Bithorn Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico. On September 29, 2004, MLB announced the franchise would relocate to Washington, D.C. for the 2005 season, and the Expos played their final home game in Montreal. The Expos posted an all-time record of 2,753 wins, 2,943 losses and 4 ties during their 36 years in Montreal. Vladimir Guerrero led the franchise in both home runs and batting average, and Steve Rogers in wins and strikeouts. 3 pitchers threw 4 no-hitters. Bill Stoneman twice, Charlie Lee, and Dennis Martinez, who pitched the 13th official perfect game in Major League Baseball history. The Expos retired 4 numbers in Montreal, and 9 former members have been elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, with Gary Carter, Andre Dawson and Tim Raines, plaques depicting them with Expos caps. Professional baseball in Montreal dates back to 1890 when teams briefly played in the International Association. A second attempt at hosting a pro team failed in 1895. The Montreal Royals of the Eastern League were subsequently founded in 1897 and played 20 seasons. The Royals were revived in 1928 and were purchased by the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1939 to serve as one of their AAA affiliates. Under Dodgers management, the Royals won 7 International League championships and 3 Junior World Series titles between 1941 and 1958. In 1946, Jackie Robinson joined the Royals and led the team to a Junior World Series title in advance of his breaking baseball's color barrier 1 year later. By the late 1950s, the Royals' championship years were past, and faced with declining attendance, the team was sold and relocated following the 1960 season as the Dodgers reduced the number of teams they maintained at the AAA level. Almost immediately upon the Royals' demise, Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau and City Executive Committee Chairman Jerry Snyder began their campaign for a Major League Baseball team. The city, which had previously been considered a leading candidate to acquire the St. Louis Browns if the team had relocated in 1933, was too late to submit its candidacy for a team as part of the National League's 1962 expansion, but presented its bid to the league's owners at the winter meetings in 1967. Aiding Montreal's bid was the fact that Walter Omley, who owned the Dodgers and formerly oversaw the Montreal Royals, was the chairman of the NL's expansion committee. On May 27, 1968, National League President Warren Giles announced the league would add expansion teams in San Diego and Montreal at a cost of $10 million. With the franchise secured, Snyder built an ownership group of 6 partners led by financier Jean-Louis Elvesque and Seagramer Charles Bronfman. Elvesque was originally tapped as chairman and the public face of the ownership group since he was a francophone. However, he bowed out, and Bronfman took over as chairman. The new group was faced with the immediate problem of finding a suitable facility in which to play for at least 2 years. Drapeau had promised the NL that a domed stadium thought to be a must due to Montreal's cold weather in April, October and sometimes September would be built by 1971. However, Snyder's successor as executive committee chairman, Lucien Saulnier, told Bronfman that Drapeau could not make such a guarantee on his own authority. As 1968 dragged on without movement from the city on the facility, Bronfman and his group threatened to walk away. While they had more than enough money between them to pay the first installment of the expansion fee, they wanted assurances that a park would be built before proceeding any further with the effort. The Lorimier Stadium, which hosted the Royals, was rejected even as a temporary facility. It could not be expanded beyond its 20,000-seat capacity because it was in a residential area. The Autostade, home of the Canadian Football League's Montreal Alouettes, was ruled out due to the prohibitive cost of expanding it and adding a dome, as well as doubts that the city even had the right to make the needed renovations to the federally owned facility. By August 1968, the NL owners had grown increasingly concerned about the unresolved stadium question, putting the franchise's future in doubt. There were rumors of awarding the franchise to Buffalo, New York instead, whose War Memorial Stadium was ready to host a team. League President Warren Giles was reassured of Montreal's viability when shown a 33,000-seat community field in the centrally located Jarry Park that Drapeau proposed expanding to 30,000 seats as a temporary home for the Expos, at a cost of over $1 million. Several options for a team name were considered. Royals was a popular option with fans in honor of the minor league Royals, but the name had already been taken by the Kansas City Royals. Other names considered included Voyagers and Nationals. The team settled on Expos, a name with the same spelling in French and English, in recognition of the recently concluded Expo 67 World's Fair. Less than a year after the city was awarded a team, the Expos took to the field to begin the 1969 season. With Gene Mauch as their inaugural manager, the Expos made their debut on April 8, 1969. An 11-10 victory over the New York Mets at Shea Stadium. The team played its first home game and the first major league game outside the United States on April 14. It was an 8-7 victory over the St. Louis Cardinals before 29,000 fans at Jarry Park Stadium. 3 days later, on April 17, in just the team's 9th game played in their history up to that point, Bill Stoneman pitched the first no-hitter in Expos history with a 7-0 victory over the Philadelphia Phillies. The excitement of the early season heroics quickly gave way to the realities of being an expansion team as the Expos struggled for much of their inaugural season. Montreal tied their expansion cousins, the San Diego Padres, for the worst record in the NL with a record of 52-110. The team fared little better in the following seasons. The Expos went 73 and 89 in 1970 and 71 and 90 in 1971. The team's best player and first star in its early seasons was Rusty Staub, acquired from the Houston Astros in a trade prior to the Expos' inaugural season. He led the Expos with 30 home runs in 1970 and, owing to his red hair, was nicknamed Le Grand Orange. Staub was Montreal's lone representative at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in the team's first 3 seasons, and endeared himself to the local fans by learning French. Also popular was pitcher Claude Raymond, who completed his Major League career with Montreal in '72 and was the team's first French-Canadian star. Pitcher Carl Morton, who posted an 18-11 record in 1970, was the first player in franchise history to be named National League Rookie of the Year. Bill Stoneman threw his second no-hitter, and the first pitched outside the United States, in a 7-0 win over the Mets in Montreal on October 2, 1972. The team failed to post a winning season in its first 10 years and finished 5th or 6th in the 6-team NL East 8 times. Attendance declined as the initial excitement of having a team wore off. It recovered briefly in '73 as the Expos mounted an unsuccessful charge at the NL East pennant, before declining sharply in '74 and beyond. By '76, attendance had dropped to just over 600,000 fans over the course of the season, less than half of what the Expos drew in their inaugural season. The on-field product was not the only concern for the Expos. Jarry Park was only intended to serve as a temporary home until 1971 at the latest. Even allowing for this, it left much to be desired as a baseball venue. The grandstands were completely exposed to the elements, forcing the Expos to postpone a number of early season games. Additionally, the sun set directly in the face of first baseman, forcing delays. Due to numerous delays and cost overruns with its intended replacement, Olympic Stadium, the Expos were forced to stay in Jarry until 1976. The team's future was also placed in doubt following an angry speech by Bronfman in which he threatened to relocate his family and the Seagram Company outside Quebec if the Separatist Parti Québécois won a majority government in the '76 Quebec election. The Parti Québécois did win the election, however. Bronfman and the Expos remained in Quebec. For the 1977 season, the Expos moved into their new ballpark, Olympic Stadium, 6 years later than originally scheduled. For a time in the '76 and '77 off-season, however, it appeared that the Expos would have to play at least the early part of the season at Jarry Park due to delays in securing a lease for Olympic Stadium. The team broke off negotiations not long after the PQ's landslide victory in the '76 provincial election. Negotiations dragged out through the winter, leading the Expos to begin selling 1977 season tickets under the assumption they would have to play at Jarry. However, an agreement was finally reached in early '77. A total of 57,000 fans attended Montreal's opening day 7-2 loss to Philadelphia. The new facility was a significant upgrade, although weather-related issues created by Montreal's harsh climate persisted until the stadium's roof was installed in 1987. Over the years, the stadium became notorious for its poor playing conditions. Players were frequently at risk for injury due to thin padding on the outfield fences, as well as the original artificial turf that remained in place for over 2 decades. Ultimately, the park became viewed as a white elephant. On the field, the Expos continued to fare poorly. The team won 75 games in 1977, and 76 games in 1978. Though the losing seasons mounted, the Expos built a solid core of players, led by Gary Carter, who went on to become one of baseball's best hitting catchers, pitcher Steve Rogers and outfielders Andre Dawson and Tim Raines. They supplemented their young roster with veteran acquisitions such as future Hall of Famer Tony Perez, and in '77, the Expos also hired Dick Williams as the team's manager. Williams had developed a reputation for nurturing young talent. He had managed a young Boston Red Sox team to the American League pennant in 1967 and the Oakland Athletics to back-to-back World Series titles in '72 and '73. In '79, Montreal had its first winning season in franchise history. In mid-July, the Expos led the NL East by 6.5 games, before finishing second to the Pittsburgh Pirates by 2 games with a 95 and 65 record. The fans responded. Montreal drew 2 million fans for the first time in franchise history, and it was the first of 5 consecutive seasons that the team was in the top 4 of National League attendance. Though they won 5 fewer games in 1980, the Expos finished merely 1 game behind the Philadelphia Phillies for the division lead. In both seasons, the Expos were in the hunt for the division title into the last weekend of the season before losing to the Ultimate World Series champion. In 1981, Jarry Lee pitched the third no-hitter in franchise history. He defeated the San Francisco Giants on May 10, 1981. The Expos were in third place in the NL East with a 30-25 record when the season was halted for 2 months by a player's strike. By the time the strike ended, 713 games had been lost and could not possibly be made up. Major League Baseball chose to adopt a split-season schedule, which gave the Expos a fresh start in the second half of the season. With the team languishing near the 500 mark in post-strike play, the club fired Williams and replaced him with scouting director Jim Fanning. The team continued to struggle, though, and had a 19-19 record with 15 games left to play. Montreal won 11 of the remaining games and finished in first place, a half game ahead of the Pittsburgh Pirates, thereby qualifying for the franchise's first postseason berth. Terry Francona caught the final out, a fly ball hit by Dave Kingman to seal a 5-4 victory over the New York Mets in the clinching game. In the 1981 National League Division Series, the Expos faced the first-half winners, the defending world champion Phillies. Montreal won the first 2 games, at Olympic Stadium, by identical 3-1 scores before dropping the following 2 games in Philadelphia. In the deciding 5th game, Montreal's Steve Rogers faced Steve Carlton in the pitchers' duel. Rogers pitched a complete game shutout as Montreal advanced to the 81 National League Championship Series with a 3-0 win. Facing the Los Angeles Dodgers, Montreal split the first 2 games of the best-of-5 series in Los Angeles before returning home for the final 3 games. Montreal won Game 3, but failed in their first attempt to close out the series by losing Game 4 and set up a deciding 5th game. The deciding game, postponed by a day due to rain, was played October 19, 1981, in near-freezing temperatures. The game was tied at 1 entering the 9th inning when Fanning opted to have his top starter, Steve Rogers, come out of the bullpen to pitch. Rogers retired the first 2 batters before facing Rick Mundy. What followed was the defining moment in Expos history. On a 3-1 count, Rogers hung a sinking fastball that Mundy hit over the center field fence for the game-winning and series-clinching home run. The moment, and game, became known to Expos fans as Blue Monday. The dramatic loss was a bitter defeat for a franchise who by that time had been adopted as Canada's most popular baseball team. By the end of the 79 season, the Expos had earned a reputation for having one of the strongest player development systems in baseball. The team had stockpiled young talent throughout its roster, including 4 starting pitchers below the age of 23, and was hailed as the team of the 80s. When Montreal hosted the 82 Major League Baseball All-Star Game on July 18, 1982, Expos fans voted 4 of their own into the starting lineup: Carter, Dawson, Raines and Rogers, while Al Oliver was named as a reserve. It was only the second time since '69 the host team had 4 starters. The National League claimed a 4-1 victory in front of 59,000 fans in the first All-Star game held outside the United States. Rogers was the winning pitcher. Baseball historian and author Jonah Kerry argued in his book Up and Away that no one at the stadium could know it then, but baseball in Montreal peaked that night at the Big O. The Expos were widely predicted to win the NL East in '82. Sports Illustrated, Baseball Digest and The Sporting News were among the publications that favored Montreal. However, the team disappointed. Montreal finished 3rd in the division with 86 wins. The Expos replaced Fanning with Bill Verdon in '83, and under their new manager, led the division in mid-July. However, the team faded down the stretch and finished with an 82-80 record. The Expos won more games between '79 and '83 than any other team in the NL East, but had only 1 postseason appearance to show for it. Hoping to turn the team's fortunes around, the Expos signed 42-year-old veteran Pete Rose, who was second all-time in base hits to Ty Cobb, to a 1-year contract in 1984. Rose reached a career milestone in Montreal's home opener by recording the 40-HOUSANDTH hit of his career in the victory over Philadelphia on April 13. Though players and management had praised the acquisition of Rose and predicted he would help the team win the division, he was ineffective for Montreal. Rose batted only .259 and failed to hit a home run in 95 games before he was traded back to his original team, Cincinnati, and Montreal finished with a losing record on the season. Montreal's failed '84 season resulted in a 31% decrease in attendance. At the same time, salaries were escalating throughout baseball. As a consequence, the Expos completed a major trade following the season, sending Gary Carter to the New York Mets on December 10, 1984, in exchange for 4 players. In trading Carter, the Expos gave up a team icon who, like Rusty Staub before him, endeared himself to the fans by learning French and being one of the most accessible players on the team. The trade came 1 year after Bronfman had called the 7-year, $12.6 million contract Carter signed in 1981 the biggest mistake he had made in his life. The economics of Major League Baseball also resulted in the departure of Andre Dawson following the '86 season. Throughout that off-season, MLB owners colluded at the behest of Commissioner Peter Ueberroth to drive salaries for free agents down. Dawson, who should have been one of the most valuable free agents on the market that year, discovered that not only was there little interest in signing him, but that the Expos were publicly commenting about his knee problems in an effort to further drive interest down. Angered by these actions, Dawson walked into the Chicago Cubs training camp with a signed, blank contract. The Cubs agreed to sign Dawson to a 1-year, $500,000 contract, less than half of his previous salary. Dawson hit 49 home runs and drove in 137 runs in 1987, attaining the honor of NL Most Valuable Player. Tim Raines was also affected by collusion. After receiving no offer worth more than the $1.5 million he earned in '86, Raines returned to the Expos on a 3-year, $5 million contract. He had one of the best seasons of his career in '87, leading the NL with 123 runs, stealing 50 bases, batting .330 and hitting 18 home runs. He was also named the most valuable player of the '87 Major League Baseball All-Star Game, as he drove the game's only 2 runs with a triple in the 13th inning. Raines was ultimately traded to the Chicago White Sox in 1990. On the field, the Expos won just 4 games more than they lost between '86 and '91 as the organization set about rebuilding its development system and acquiring a new generation of players. The team struggled to attract free agents to Montreal, and Bronfman had grown disillusioned with both the business of baseball and the challenge of drawing fans to Olympic Stadium for a middling ball club. He hoped to take one more chance at winning a title, however, and in 1989, the Expos made a push for a division title by acquiring starting pitcher and pending free agent Mark Langston from the Seattle Mariners. The price would ultimately prove to be a high one as the Expos gave up future Hall of Famer Randy Johnson and 2 other pitchers. The trade helped propel the Expos to first place in the NL East by the All-Star break. They held the top spot into August before Langston and the team collapsed. The Expos finished 4th in the division with an 81-81 record, and Langston left Montreal as a free agent. Bronfman grew increasingly uneasy about the reckless spending of his fellow team owners, increased strife with the players, and overall direction of MLB. According to then-team president Claude Brochu, the team's late-season decline in '89 proved too much for Bronfman, who asked him to seek a buyer for the team. Bronfman hoped to sell the team for around $50 million, but both he and Brochu found it impossible to find a local businessman willing to take primary ownership of the team. Groups from American cities were interested, however. One group offered to buy the club for $135 million and relocate it to Miami. However, Bronfman viewed a relocation as a last resort. Robert E. Rich Jr. offered to buy the club for $100 million and relocate it to Buffalo at their recently built pilot field, but received the same response. Instead, Brochu opted to lead the group himself. The city and the province agreed to fund $33 million of the $100 million sales price Bronfman had settled on, after which he and partner Jacques Emnard convinced 11 other Canadian businesses and businessmen such as Bell Canada, Desjardins Group, the Gene With a new ownership group in place, the Expos traded Tim Raines to the Chicago White Sox in the 5-player deal. General manager David Dombrowski fired manager Buck Rogers, who had managed the team since '85, after the team started the '91 season with a 20-29 record, replacing him with Tom Runnels. Mark Gardner pitched 9 no-hit innings in a July 26, 1991 game before losing in the 10th inning to the Los Angeles Dodgers. 2 days later, also in Los Angeles, Dennis Martinez achieved a rare feat, throwing the 13th official perfect game in Major League Baseball history. Dave Van Horn's iconic call of El Presidente, El Perfecto, following the final out became a hallmark of Expos lore. Martinez's catcher, Ron Hassey, also caught Len Barker's perfect game 10 years earlier and remains the only player to catch 2 perfect games in MLB history. The euphoria of the pitching feats did not last, as the Expos were rendered homeless for the final month of the season after a 50-ton beam collapsed from Olympic Stadium structure and fell 9 meters onto public concourse hours before a motocross event on September 13th. The Expos hinted that they would have to open the '92 season elsewhere unless Olympic Stadium was certified safe. While the stadium itself was given a clean bill of health by engineers in November, it took longer to get one for the roof since it had been badly ripped in a June windstorm. Ultimately, it was decided to keep the roof closed at all times. It had only been opened 88 times in a little more than 4 years. The Expos finished 1991 with a 71-90 record, 6th in the NL East, and drew fewer than 1 million fans for the first time since '76. However, the foundation of the Expos' future was establishing their places in MLB. Larry Walker, Marky Grissom and Delino DeShields had made their debuts the season prior, and the team acquired Moises Alou in a trade with Pittsburgh. Moises, father Philippe, who had been a long-time employee of the Expos, was promoted to manager during the '92 season and became the first native of the Dominican Republic to manage a Major League Baseball team. In 1993, DeShields was sent to Los Angeles in exchange for Pedro Martinez. The deal was initially pilloried by the Montreal Gazette and other local publications as a move designed to save money rather than improve the ball club. Nonetheless, the Expos improved on the field. They won 87 games in 1992, 94 games in 1993 and finished second in the NL East both seasons. The Expos were recognized as having a strong team entering the '94 season, but their hopes of winning the division were significantly impacted by realignment, as the 3-time defending West Division champion Atlanta Braves were shifted to the East. Atlanta opened the season with 13 wins in 14 games, and quickly opened up an 8.5-game lead on Montreal. By late June, the Expos had moved to 2.5 games back when they hosted the Braves. Montreal won 2 out of 3 games in the series, including a late-game victory in the opener over future Hall of Fame pitcher Greg Maddux that the players viewed as the turning point of their season. Montreal then embarked on a West Coast road trip in which they won the final 5 games and entered the All-Star break in first place. The Expos pulled away from the Braves after the break. Between July 18th and August 11th, Montreal won 20 games and lost only 3. For the second time in team history, 5 players were named All-Stars. Moises Alou, Wilker Darrow, Darren Fletcher, Marky Grissom and Ken Hill. An offense led by Marky Grissom, Moises Alou, Larry Walker and Wilker Darrow scored more than 5 runs per game. With a record of 74-40, on pace for a 106-win season as the pitching staff with Butch Henry, Ken Hill, Jeff Facero and a young Pedro Martinez put up the National League's best ERA. The Expos had the best record in baseball on the morning of August 12th, when MLB's players went on strike. The season began without a collective bargaining agreement as MLB's owners could not agree on how to share revenue between teams. Many teams were unwilling to agree to revenue sharing unless a salary cap was put in place, something which the Major League Baseball Players Association adamantly opposed. Unable to come to an agreement, the owners attempted to unilaterally force their system into effect, prompting the players to walk out. Most of the players believed they would be back on the field by Labor Day at the latest. On September 14th, following a month of fruitless negotiations, the remainder of the season was cancelled. The franchise would never reach the playoffs as the Expos again. From Broku's perspective, a salary cap was not a major concern for the Expos as they could not afford to spend the maximum value of any negotiated cap. But when the strike ended 8 months later, by the order of United States Federal Judge Sonia Sotomayor, the failure to implement strong revenue sharing was a major blow to the Expos. The team had already built a reputation as a penny-pinching organization with the second lowest payroll in MLB in 1994. Following the strike, the team initiated a fire sale of players. Ken Hill, John Wetteland and Marky Grissom were traded while Larry Walker was allowed to leave as a free agent. Moya Eselu, Pedro Martinez and Mel Rojas would eventually follow. In his book, My Turn at Bat, Broku argued that a fire sale was the only viable option, since his partners in the ownership group were not interested in financing the team's losses. Broku estimated that had he tried to keep the '94 team together, the Expos would have lost $25 million in '95, which would have pushed the franchise to the edge of bankruptcy. He claimed that he would have certainly kept Hill, Wetteland, Grissom and Walker had the partners been willing to put up the money necessary to keep them in Montreal. When Broku told General Manager Kevin Malone that Hill, Wetteland, Grissom and Walker all had to go, Malone tried to persuade Broku to keep at least one of them. It was to no avail. Broku told Malone that they all had to be off the roster by the deadline for salary arbitration, even though this made it all but impossible to get any leverage in possible deals. As a result, the Expos got almost nothing in return. The strike and ensuing fire sale left fans in Montreal livid. The Expos finished last in the NL East in '95, and average game attendance fell by nearly 26%, from 24,000 to 18,000. Interest in the Expos continued to decline in the years that followed. They would never average more than 20,000 fans per game in a season again during their tenure in Montreal. While noting the Atlanta Braves went on to win 11 consecutive NL East titles following the strike, Joe Kerry expressed the viewpoint of the fans as it related to Broku and the team's owners. Expos fans couldn't help but wonder if that could have been them celebrating every year had Broku convinced the team's cheapskate owners to spend a few damn dollars, or taken a leap of faith that short-term financial pain would lead to long-term success. The media, meanwhile, had taken to calling the Expos a triple-A team, as the team seemed to enter a period where they would develop players only to move them on to other organizations. In spite of the sharp decline in attendance, Broku claimed the Expos turned a small profit in '95, while ticket sales increased in other markets in the seasons following the strike, though Montreal's fan base continued to erode. Even with the loss of most of their best players, the Expos were competitive in '96, achieving second place in the NL East with an 88-74 record. The team fared poorly in the following 5 seasons, however, finishing with a losing record in each year and no higher than 4th in the division. Individually, Pedro Martinez became the first native of the Dominican Republic and only Expo to win the National League Cy Young Award. He won the award in '97 after recording an 18-7 record with an earned run average of 1.9. 1 week after he was announced as the NL Cy Young winner, Martinez was traded to the Boston Red Sox as part of another salary purge. As the '90s wore on, interest in the Expos dwindled to the point that they were barely part of Montreal's sports landscape. Lou recalled in the latter part of the decade, an old friend of his who owned a team in the Dominican Republic came to Montreal for a visit and couldn't find any downtown store that sold Expos caps, nor did he see anyone wearing an Expos cap during his week-long stay in the city. When he took a taxi to a game at Olympic Stadium, the driver couldn't find the entrance, and there were no signs anywhere touting games. According to Lou's friend, with such lackluster marketing, it was no surprise that the Expos couldn't attract any fans. Kerry later wrote that the Expos would not have been in this position had a better financed champion, with the resources and the patience to shepherd the team through the '90s, bought the team. Broku attempted to convince his partners that the only long-term solution to keep the Expos in Montreal was to replace Olympic Stadium. In addition to being poorly located far from population centers, restaurants, and bars, fans perceived it as cavernous and unsafe. Additionally, free agents were letting it be known they were not willing to play for the Expos because of Olympic Stadium's poor playing conditions. A proposed 35,000-seat downtown facility, to be called Labatt Park, was announced in '97 with a budgeted cost of $250 million and an anticipated opening date of 2001. It would have been a retro classic park with a facade reminiscent of historic Bonaventure Station. According to a Montreal Gazette editorial supporting the new park, Broku's threat to move the team unless Olympic Stadium was replaced was simple logic. Broku sought $150 million in funding from the provincial government, but Premier Lucien Bouchard refused, saying he could not authorize public funding for a stadium when the province was being forced to close hospitals and had still not paid the Olympic Stadium debt. Many members of the consortium instead favored selling the team. Hoping to pressure a sale, some members began to feed anonymous tips to the French press to make internal discord between Broku and his partners public. Attendance continued to fall, decreasing by 39% in 1998 to an average of 11,000 spectators per game. It was the first of 5 consecutive seasons in which Montreal drew fewer than 1 million fans. One of the few bright spots of this time was the blossoming of Vladimir Guerrero into a star. He made 4 consecutive All-Star games from 1999 to 2002, each time as the Expos' sole representative. Guerrero would eventually be elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2018. By 1999, the partners publicly began to question Broku's fitness to lead the organization, and he was criticized by the media. Broku was also accused of having a secret deal with MLB Commissioner Bob Selig to relocate the Expos to Washington, the charges he denied in a spring press conference held to answer the accusations of his partners. Broku's rebuttals fell on deaf ears as fans sided with the consortium's smear campaign against Broku. He was ultimately replaced as managing general partner by American art dealer Jeffrey Loria, who was initially hailed as the franchise's savior. Loria had originally bid for the team in '91, but Broku and Emnard had balked at his demand for controlling interest. When Loria took control, he let it be known that Broku's low-budget approach, or as he called it, business as usual, was over. He promised to rebuild the Expos with a winning attitude and winning players, in an effort to bring the team back to where it had been only 6 years earlier. To that end, he drafted a new partnership agreement that gave him the right to call for cash investments in exchange for team equity, an option that had been unavailable to Broku. Most of the minority partners, though, continued to treat their participation as a public relations gesture and remained uninterested in investing additional money. When Loria issued a cash call in May 2000, the only other partners to increase their contributions were Kuchu, Loblaw, and Stephen Bronfman. Rather than contribute more money, the minority partners proposed trading the role. Loria instantly vetoed this suggestion. As Loria increased his own financial contribution over the next 2 years, most of the other partners failed to do likewise, which resulted in Loria raising his share in the franchise to 92%. Speaking in retrospect, one of the minority partners, Mark Rautenberg, said that he was both fooled and used by Loria and called him a carpetbagger. The team payroll for 2000 increased to $33 million, nearly double the $18 million from the previous season. However, Loria's options for rebuilding the team were somewhat limited. He discovered that he needed to improve the team immediately in order to win back the fans' trust, rather than relying on long-term improvements via the draft. Even with the team's renewed willingness to spend more on talent, most elite players were reluctant to play in Montreal, given the franchise's uncertain future and Olympic Stadium's poor playing conditions. As a result, most of the increased payroll came from the signings of free agent pitchers Graham Lloyd and Hideki Irabu, as well as a three-way trade with the Rangers and Blue Jays that brought Rangers first baseman Lee Stevens to Montreal. These moves failed to translate into on-field success. Lloyd missed the entire season due to arthroscopic surgery. Irabu posted a 7.22 ERA, and Stevens only batted .265. The Expos lost 95 games. Interest in the team continued to decline, as both fans and businesses were unwilling to lend their support to a non-competitive team. Loria continued to pursue the construction of a new ballpark. He sought support from Major League Baseball, the Quebec government, and architectural firm HOK Sport for a cheaper and redesigned version of Labatt Park that eschewed the retro classic concept in favor of a more modern design with curved contours and glass. HOK and MLB both thought Loria's proposed design was structurally unsound. More seriously, although Loria had been led to believe that Emnard had convinced the provincial government to contribute funding, in reality no agreement had been reached. To bolster the team's finances, Loria tried to renegotiate the Expos' broadcasting deals, which were far less valuable than that of any other team. He broke off negotiations with the Sports Network, the largest English-language cable sports network in Canada, when it only offered the Expos $5,000 per game. Even allowing for the Expos' greatly reduced home territory compared to that of the Blue Jays, TSN's offer was still a pittance compared to the $200,000 it paid the Blue Jays at the time. Laurier had similar issues with prospective radio partners. The only interested parties would only air Expos games as part of a brokerage agreement in which the team paid for the airtime. The Alouettes and Canadiens had similar arrangements, which was considered highly unusual for the time. Although the team continued its French radio coverage on the Telemedia network whose flagship, CKAC, had carried the Expos since 1973, the Expos were unable to reach an agreement for English radio broadcasts. This resulted in the end of the Expos' long-time run on CIQC, which had been the Expos' English radio outlet for all but 4 years of their existence. No television coverage was available in either language. This left English-speaking fans relying on internet audio casts. Local fans accused Laurier and his stepson, David Sampson, of sabotage. In truth, though, according to longtime Montreal sportscaster Mitch Melnick, there was no Anglophone radio for the 2000 season because nobody wanted to pay for it. Years later, Sampson said that he had initially hoped that if the Expos got off to a hot start, local broadcasters would initiate new negotiations, but further discussions never materialized. Dave Van Horn, the team's English-language play-by-play announcer since the team's inception, left at the season's end to work for the Florida Marlins. In 2001, the Expos drew only 642,000 fans, one of the smallest totals in MLB in decades. The minority partners, whose interest was now reduced to a combined 7%, became convinced that Laurier had planned his moves to force them out. When pleas to Selig and MLB officials fell on deaf ears, the group became convinced that Selig and Laurier had conspired to force the Expos out of Montreal. At the same time, MLB took steps to vote on contraction of the leagues, with the Expos and the Minnesota Twins slated for elimination. On November 6, 2001, MLB's owners voted 28-2 in favor of contraction, with only the Expos and Twins opposed. Initial plans called for the Expos and Twins to play a lame duck season in 2002 before their franchises were revoked. Both teams were saved following a legal challenge filed in Minnesota that forced MLB to honor the Twins' lease with the Metrodome, as well as challenges by the MLBPA, as MLB was unable to find another candidate team to abolish. The immediate threat for the Expos diminished, as MLB needed to keep an even number of teams to maintain its schedule. Shortly afterward, Laurier sold the Expos to MLB and used the money he received from the sale to purchase the Florida Marlins from John Henry, who had recently purchased the Boston Red Sox. As a result of the transaction, Laurier turned a significant profit on his initial $16 million investment. MLB bought the Expos from him for $120 million and gave him a $38 million interest-free loan to complete the purchase of the Marlins. Following the sale, Laurier took virtually everything of value with him to Miami, including the Expos, computers and scouting reports. His departure also marked the final end of the proposed Labatt Park, though any realistic chance of the park being built ended when the Bouchard government repeated its previous refusal to commit any public money to the project. MLB formed Expos Baseball LP, a partnership of the other 29 clubs, to operate the team. It appointed former Anaheim Angels president Tony Tavares as team president to oversee business operations and oversee a future move of the team, and Mets assistant general manager Omar Minaya as vice president, general manager and operating head of the franchise. MLB's chief disciplinarian Frank Robinson was appointed as the team's manager. Minaya, the first Latino general manager in baseball history, inherited a difficult situation. He was hired only 72 hours before the start of spring training, and there were only 6 other employees in baseball operations. Most of the others had either followed Laurier to the Marlins or taken jobs with other clubs. As the Expos began what many assumed at the time to be their final season in 2002, the mood in the Olympic Stadium for the home opener victory over the Marlins was ugly. Montreal's home opener drew 34,000 fans, many of which came not only to say goodbye to the franchise, but also to express their disgust and anger at Laurier. Lauria's minority partners, who had gone from collectively owning 76% of the Expos to less than 7% of the Marlins, filed a racketeer-influenced and corrupt Organizations Act lawsuit against Major League Baseball, Selig and Lauria. The partners contended that Lauria and the Commissioner's office had conspired to deprive them of their shares by issuing cash calls, and thus deliberately undermine the franchise's future in Montreal. The partners were ultimately unsuccessful in their suit, as it was dismissed in 2005 after an arbitration panel rejected their claims. On the field, the 2002 Expos exceeded expectations and were in playoff contention for much of the season. As they were owned by the other teams, including their direct competitors, the Expos did not have any flexibility to increase their payroll for a last-ditch postseason drive. Operating under the belief that the Expos were playing their last season in Montreal, Minaya completed a blockbuster trade with the Cleveland Indians in late June to make a final run at bringing postseason success to the city, acquiring Bartolo Colon, one of baseball's top pitchers, in exchange for several star prospects and without increasing payroll. Remembering how the Seattle Mariners had revived a stalled bid for what became Safeco Field with a playoff run in '95, Minaya believed that if the Expos made the playoffs, the renewed public and private sector support would lead to a viable owner stepping forward who would keep the team in Montreal. Minaya made several smaller moves, but the team lost its early season momentum. They went 7 games under 500 in July and August. The Expos finished with an 83-79 record, their first winning season since '96, but finished second in the NL East, 19 games out of both the division lead and the wild card. The Expos franchise was saved by a new collective bargaining agreement between the owners and players that forbade contraction until at least 2006. Speculation of contraction was replaced by rumors of relocation, as it was obvious MLB did not intend to keep the team in Montreal. While MLB was not ready to relocate the Expos right away in 2003, it sought to increase revenues by having the team play 22 of its 81 home games in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Expos again found themselves in contention for the playoffs. On August 29th, the team was tied with 4 other clubs for the National League wildcard spot. When MLB's rosters expanded on September 1st, Selig announced that the Expos would not be recalling any additional players from the minor leagues. The other owners had decided against spending a few extra $1,000, a small fraction of the team's $35 million payroll, to bolster the team. Several players, including relief pitcher Eric Knott, were sent back to the minors due to budget constraints. The team faded again, finishing 18 games out of first in the East and 8 games out of the wild card spot. Later, Minaya said that the denial of the September call-ups was a message to the players, and a momentum killer. Kerry later wrote that MLB's refusal to authorize the September call-ups eroded what goodwill the Expos still had among the Montreal fanbase. After the season, Gurro was lost to free agency, while staff ace Javier Vizquez was traded to the Yankees. The final season of the Montreal Expos came in 2004, and was again split between Montreal and San Juan. The team never recovered from an April win-loss record of 5-19, and finished the season with a 67-95 record. On September 29, 2004, Major League Baseball announced that the franchise would relocate to Washington, D.C. for the 2005 season. That same night, the team played its final game in Montreal, a loss before 31,000 fans. The team then played its final games as the Expos on the road, ending on October 3 against the New York Mets, the team they had faced in the franchise's inaugural game in 1969. In the Expos' last ever game, the New York Mets defeated Montreal at Shea Stadium. Jamie Carroll scored the last Expos run, and NDCH Vez became the final Expos batter in history when he grounded out in the top of the 9th to end the game. The team ended their 36-year run with an all-time record of 2,753 wins, 2,943 losses and 4 ties. The last active former Montreal Expos player in the major leagues was Bartolo Colon, who played what is likely his last game with the Texas Rangers in 2018. Colon played half a season with the Expos in 2002. The Washington Nationals occasionally wear Expos throwback uniforms. The Nationals won the 2019 World Series, the franchise's first title in its 51 seasons, under manager Dave Martinez, who had played with the Expos from '88 to '91. The Toronto Blue Jays are a Canadian professional baseball team based in Toronto, Ontario. The Blue Jays compete in Major League Baseball as a member club of the American League East Division. The team ordinarily plays its home games at Rogers Centre, but used Solon Field in Buffalo, New York, as its home for the 2020 season due to border restrictions brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. The name Blue Jays originates from the bird of the same name, and blue is also the traditional color of Toronto's collegiate and professional sports teams, including the Maple Leafs in hockey and the Argonauts, the Canadian football team. Out of the over 4,000 suggestions, 154 people selected the name Blue Jays. In addition, the team was originally owned by the Labatt Brewing Company, makers of the popular beer Labatt's Blue. Colloquially nicknamed the Jays, the team's official colors are royal blue, navy blue, red, and white. An expansion franchise, the club was founded in Toronto in 1977. Originally based at Exhibition Stadium, the team began playing its home games at Skydome upon its opening in 1989. Since 2000, the Blue Jays have been owned by Rogers Communications, and in 2004, Skydome was purchased by that company, which renamed it Rogers Centre. They are the second MLB franchise to be based outside the United States, and currently the only team based outside the US, after the first Canadian franchise, the Montreal Expos, became the Washington Nationals in 2005. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Blue Jays went through struggles typical of an expansion team, frequently finishing in last place in its division. In 1983, the team had its first winning season, and 2 years later, they became division champions. From 1985 to 1993, they were an AL East powerhouse, winning 5 division championships in 9 seasons, including 3 consecutive from 1991 through 1993. During that run, the team also became back-to-back World Series champions in 1992 and 1993, led by a core group of award-winning all-star players, including Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar, Joe Carter, John Olerud, and Devin White. The Blue Jays became the first and, to date, only team outside the US to appear in and win the World Series, and the fastest AL expansion team to do so, winning in its 16th year. As of 2019, they are one of only 2 MLB franchises that are undefeated through multiple World Series appearances, along with the National League's Miami Marlins. After 1993, the Blue Jays failed to qualify for the playoffs for 21 consecutive seasons, until clinching a playoff berth and division championship in 2015. The team clinched a second consecutive playoff berth in 2016, after securing an AL wildcard position. In both years, the Jays beat the Texas Rangers in the AL Division Series, but lost the AL Championship Series. The Blue Jays and the Atlanta Braves are the only 2 MLB teams under corporate ownership. The Blue Jays are also the only American League team to be under such ownership. In January 1976, San Francisco Giants owner Horace Stoneham agreed to sell the team for $13 million to a Toronto group which was led by Don McDougall and consisted of Labatt Breweries of Canada, Vulcan Assets owned by the Globe and Mail chairman and president Howard Webster, and Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. The team was to have begun play in the 1976 season at Exhibition Stadium, and would have been called the Toronto Giants. However, the plan to move the Giants was quashed by a U.S. court. Following the court ruling, Bob Lurie purchased the Giants and kept them in San Francisco. The city of Toronto had renovated Exhibition Stadium to accommodate Major League Baseball in anticipation of the Giants' relocation there, and continued to push for an MLB franchise. MLB awarded Toronto an expansion franchise in 1976, along with Seattle, Washington. A consortium composed of Labatt Breweries, Webster and CIBC purchased the rights for the franchise from MLB for $7 million. However, even after the franchises were awarded, the future of baseball in Toronto appeared uncertain. U.S. President Gerald Ford had attempted to put pressure on MLB to give Washington, D.C. an expansion franchise instead of Toronto. Washington had been without Major League Baseball since the Senators were moved to Arlington, Texas to become the Texas Rangers following the 1972 season. Following this development, there was brief speculation by Metro Toronto chairman Paul Godfrey, among others, that Washington would be awarded Toronto's American League franchise and Toronto would instead be awarded a National League expansion franchise. However, Ford's attempts did not amount to anything and Toronto was allowed to keep its American League expansion franchise. The Blue Jays were approved as part of the 1977 Major League Baseball expansion discussions. The team was represented by legal counsel Ard Solway and Gord Kirk. Kirk prepared the original documents which led to the foundation of the team in 1976. The franchise's first employee was Paul Beeston, who began work in 1976 as the Vice President of Business Operations. Beeston later served as president of the Blue Jays and MLB. He eventually returned to the Blue Jays as president in 2008, before retiring at the conclusion of the 2015 season. Before the team's inaugural season in 1977, Peter Boghossian was chosen to be the president and general manager while Pat Gillick was named assistant general manager. The name Blue Jays came about in 1976, when the team held the Name the Team contest, which involved more than 4,000 suggestions. 154 people suggested the name Blue Jays, and Dr. William Mills, a periodontist from Etobicoke, was selected from a draw as the grand winner. Mills stated that it was traditional for a Toronto-based sports team to have the color blue as its primary color, and following the leads of the Baltimore Orioles and St. Louis Cardinals that the team be named after a bird. Another theory was that Blue Jays was chosen by majority owner Labatt Breweries, an apparent tie-in with its feature brand, Labatt Blue. However, it is very likely that the team would have used blue as one of its colors in any event. Blue has been the primary color for many of Toronto's top-level teams, the Toronto Raptors and Toronto FC being the few exceptions, as theirs are red since the Toronto Argonauts adopted it in 1873. The Blue Jays nickname was previously used, albeit unofficially, by the Philadelphia Phillies during the 1940s. The Blue Jays played their first game on April 7, 1977, against the Chicago White Sox before a home crowd of 44,000. The game is now perhaps best remembered for the minor snowstorm which began just before the game started. Toronto won the snowy affair 9-5, led by Doug Ault's 2 home runs. That win would be one of only 54 of the 1977 season, as the Blue Jays finished last in the American League East, with a record of 54-107. After the season, assistant general manager Pat Gillick succeeded Peter Boghossian as general manager of the team, a position he would hold until 1994. In 1978, the team improved their record by 5 games, but remained last, with a record of 59-102. In 1979, after a 53-109 last-place finish, shortstop Alfredo Griffin was named American League Co-Rookie of the Year. In addition, the Blue Jays' first mascot, B.J. Birdie, made its debut in 1979. In 1980, Bobby Matic became manager, succeeding Roy Hartsfield, the Blue Jays' original manager. In Matic's first season as manager, although they remained at the bottom, Toronto almost reached the 70-win mark, finishing with a record of 67-95, a 14-win improvement on 1979. Jim Clancy led with 13 wins and John Mayberry became the first Jay to hit 30 home runs in the season. In the strike-divided season of 1981, the Blue Jays finished in last place in the AL East in both halves of the season. They were a dismal 16-42 in the first half, but improved dramatically, finishing the 48-game second half at 21-27, for a combined record of 37-69. Under new manager Bobby Cox, Toronto's first solid season came in 1982 as they finished 78-84. Their pitching staff was led by starters Dave Stieb, Jim Clancy, and Luis Leal, and the outfield featured a young Lloyd Moseby and Jesse Barfield. 82 was also the Blue Jays' first season outside the bottom, as they finished 6th in the East out of 7 teams. In 83, the Blue Jays compiled their first winning record, 89-73, finishing in 4th place, 9 games behind the eventual World Series champions, the Baltimore Orioles. First baseman Willie Upshaw became the first Blue Jay to have at least 100 RBIs in the season. The Blue Jays' progress continued in '84, finishing with the same 89 and 73 record, but this time in a distant second place behind another World Series champion, the Detroit Tigers. After '84, Alfredo Griffin went to the Oakland Athletics, thus giving a permanent spot to young Dominican shortstop Tony Fernandez, who would become a fan favorite for many years. In 1985, Toronto won its first championship of any sort, the first of their 6 American League East Division titles. The Blue Jays featured strong pitching and a balanced offense. Tony Fernandez excelled in his first full season, and veteran pitcher Doyle Alexander led the team with 17 wins, including a division-clinching complete game win. Their mid-season call-up of relief pitcher Tom Henk also proved to be important. They finished 99 and 62, the franchise record for most wins, 2 games in front of the New York Yankees. The Blue Jays faced the Kansas City Royals in the American League Championship Series, and took a 3-1 lead. However, Kansas City won 3 consecutive games to win the series 4-3, on the way to their first World Series championship. The Blue Jays' successful season was dubbed the Drive of '85. After the playoffs, Cox, the AL Manager of the Year, suddenly left the Blue Jays to become general manager of the Atlanta Braves, the team he previously managed. With Jarry Williams taking over for Cox as manager, the Blue Jays could not duplicate their success in '86, sliding to a 4th-place tie at 86 and 76. Jesse Garfield and George Bell led the way with 40 and 31 home runs, respectively, while Jim Clancy, Mark Eichorn, and Jimmy Key tied for the team wins led with 14 each. In '87, the Blue Jays held a 3.5-game lead with a week to go in the season, then lost their last 7 in a row to finish 2 games back of the Detroit Tigers, getting swept on the last weekend by the Tigers. The Blue Jays finished with a 96 and 66 record, second best in the major leagues, but to no avail. However, George Bell was named the AL's most valuable player, the first Blue Jay to earn that honor. In '88, however, Toronto could not duplicate the successes of the previous season. They tied the Milwaukee Brewers for 3rd in the division at 87 and 75, only 2 games behind the division champion Boston Red Sox. Still, the season had numerous highlights. First baseman Fred McGriff hit 34 home runs, and Dave Stieb had back-to-back starts in which he lost a no-hitter with 2 out and 2 strikes in the 9th inning. In '89, the Blue Jays' new retractable roofed home, Sky Dome, opened mid-season. It also marked the beginning of an extremely successful 5-year period for the team. In May, management fired manager Jarry Williams and replaced him with Cito Gaston, the team's hitting instructor. The club had a dismal 12 and 24 record at the time of the firing, but went 77 and 49 under Gaston to win the AL East title by 2 games, with an 89 and 73 record. On May 28, George Bell's walk-off home run, off of Chicago White Sox closer Bobby Thigpen, marked the end of the exhibition stadium era. The first game at the new stadium took place on June 5 against the Milwaukee Brewers. The Jays lost 5-3. In the 1989 ALCS, Rickey Henderson led the World Series champion Oakland Athletics to a 4-1 series win. In 1990, the Blue Jays again had a strong season, but finished in 2nd place, 2 games behind the Boston Red Sox. Dave Stieb pitched his only no-hitter, beating the Cleveland Indians 3-0 in front of a less-than-capacity crowd at Cleveland Municipal Stadium. As of 2018, it remains the only no-hitter ever pitched by a Blue Jay. During the off-season, the Blue Jays made one of the 2 biggest trades in franchise history, sending all-star shortstop Tony Fernandez and first baseman Fred McGriff to the San Diego Padres in exchange for outfielder Joe Carter and second baseman Roberto Alomar. The Jays also obtained center fielder Devin White from the California Angels. These deals, particularly the trade with San Diego, were instrumental in the team's future success. Carter, Alomar and White would prove to be extremely effective additions, as the Blue Jays again won the division in '91, as Carter drove in Alomar for the division-winning run. Once again, however, they fell short in the postseason, losing to the Minnesota Twins, who were on the way to their 2nd World Series victory in 5 seasons. In the ALCS in '91, the Blue Jays became the first major league club ever to draw over 4 million fans in one After the '91 season had ended, the Blue Jays acquired pitcher Jack Morris, who had led the Minnesota Twins to victory in the World Series by pitching a 10-inning complete game shutout in Game 7 and had been named the World Series MVP to add veteran leadership to their explosive offense. Toronto signed Dave Winfield to be the team's designated hitter. The 1992 regular season went well, as the Jays clinched their second straight AL East crown with a final record of 96-66, 4 games ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers. They also went the entire season without being swept in any series, becoming the first team in 49 years to accomplish the feat. The Blue Jays met the Oakland Athletics, who had the same record as the Jays, and won the AL West by 6 games over the defending champion Twins in the ALCS, winning 4 games to 2. The pivotal game of the series was Game 4, considered by many to be one of the most important games in Blue Jays history. The Blue Jays rallied back from a 6-1 deficit after 7 innings, capped off by Roberto Alomar's huge game-tying 2-run homer off his closer Dennis Eckersley in the top of the 9th. This paved the way for a 7-6 victory in 11 innings, a 3-1 lead in the series, and an eventual 4-2 ALCS series win. The Blue Jays then faced the Atlanta Braves in the World Series. The Braves returned after being beaten by the Twins the previous year. The pivotal game in this series turned out to be Game 2, in which reserve player Ed Sprague hit a 9th-inning 2-run home run off Braves closer Jeff Reardon to give the Blue Jays a 5-4 lead, which would hold up. After winning Game 3 thanks to Candy Maldonado's 9th-inning RBI hit, and Game 4 due to Jimmy Key's superb 7 1/3-inning pitching effort in which he retired 15 straight batters, the Jays could not win the series on home turf as the Braves struck back with a 7-2 win in Game 5. Game 6 in Atlanta, with the Blue Jays leading 3-2, was a very close game. Toronto was 1 strike away from winning in the bottom of the 9th inning, 2-1, but Otis Nixon singled in the tying run off the Blue Jays closer Tom Hank. It was the first run the Toronto bullpen had given up in the series. The game was decided in the 11th inning, when Dave Winfield doubled down the left field line, driving in 2 runs. The Braves would again come within 1 run in the bottom of the 11th, but Jays reliever Mike Timlin fielded Otis Nixon's bunt, throwing to Joe Carter at first base for the final out. The Blue Jays became the first team based outside of the United States to win the World Series. Pat Borders, the Jays' catcher, was the unlikely player who was named MVP after hitting .450 with 1 home run in the World Series. Oddly, Morris was acquired in large part for his reputation as a clutch postseason pitcher, but he went 0 for 3 in the playoffs. Morris, however, pitched well in the regular season, becoming the Blue Jays' first 20-game winner, with a record of 21-6 and an ERA of 4. After the 1992 season, the Blue Jays let World Series hero Dave Winfield and longtime closer Tom Hank go, but signed 2 key free agents. Designated hitter Paul Molitor from the Milwaukee Brewers and perennial playoff success Dave Stewart from the Oakland Athletics. In '93, the Blue Jays had 7 All-Stars. Outfielders Devin White and Joe Carter, infielders John Olerud and Roberto Alomar, designated hitter Molitor, plus starting pitcher Pat Hentgen, and closer Dwayne Ward. In August, the Jays acquired former nemesis Ricky Henderson from the Athletics. The Blue Jays cruised to a 95-67 record, 7 games ahead of the New York Yankees, winning their 3rd straight division title. The Jays beat the Chicago White Sox 4-2 in the ALCS, and then the Philadelphia Phillies 4-2 for their 2nd straight World Series victory. The World Series featured several exciting games, including Game 4, played under a slight rain, in which the Blue Jays came back from a 14-9 deficit to win 15-14 and take a 3-1 lead in the series. It remains the highest scoring game in World Series history. Game 6 in Toronto saw the Blue Jays lead 5-1, but gave up 5 runs in the 7th inning to trail 6-5. In the bottom of the 9th inning, Joe Carter hit a 1-out, 3-run walk-off home run to clinch the series off of Phillies closer Mitch Williams. Only the 2nd World Series winning walk-off home run in the history of Major League Baseball, following Bill Mazeroski's in Game 7 in 1960. Carter's hit differed from the first in that Toronto, while not facing elimination, was trailing in the bottom of the 9th. The home run is also memorable for late Blue Jays broadcaster Tom Cheek's call. Expectations were high for the Blue Jays for the '94 season, following back-to-back championships, but they slumped to a 55-60 record and a third-place finish 16 games back of the New York Yankees before the players' strike. It was their first losing season since '82. Joe Carter, Paul Molitor and John O'Leary enjoyed good years at the plate, but the pitching fell off. Juan Guzman slumped considerably from his first 3 years, finishing '94 at 12-11. 3 young players, Alex Gonzalez, Carlos Delgado and Sean Green, did show much promise for the future. At the time of the strike, their fellow Canadian cousins, the Montreal Expos, had the best record in the majors, leading some to consider the possibility of the Canadian three-peat in 1994. On October 31, '94, Gillick, the longtime Blue Jays general manager, resigned and handed the reins of the team to assistant general manager and Toronto native Gordash, who would lead the team in its most tumultuous era yet. On September 1, 2000, Rogers Communications Inc. purchased 80% of the baseball club for $160 million, with Interbrew maintaining a 20% interest and the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce relinquishing its 10% share. Rogers eventually acquired the 20% owned by Interbrew and now has full ownership of the team. The 2001 season marked the 25th anniversary of the franchise's inception. Buck Martinez, a former catcher and broadcast announcer for the Blue Jays, took over as manager before the season began. The Blue Jays had a disappointing season, as the team fell back under 500, finishing at 80-82, with mediocre pitching and hitting. Delgado led the team again with 39 home runs and 102 RBI. After the 2001 season ended, the Blue Jays fired Gordash, ending a 7-year tenure as general manager. J.P. Ricciardi, then Director of Player Development under Oakland Athletics General Manager Billy Beane, was named the Blue Jays General Manager and was expected to slash the payroll immediately to stem the tide of red ink. During the off-season, the team traded or let go several popular players, including Alex Gonzalez, Paul Contrell, Brad Fulmer and closer Billy Koch, to let talented youngsters such as Eric Inst and Felipe Elpez get a chance to develop into major leaguers. During the off-season, the Jays signed Toronto-born catcher Russell Martin through free agency. The Jays acquired Marco Estrada, Devin Travis, All-Star third baseman Josh Donaldson, and Michael Saunders in trades. The Jays claimed Justin Smoke, Andy Dirks, and Chris Colabello off waivers. However, Dirks, along with John Mayberry Jr., were eventually non-tendered. The Jays later signed Dirks to a minor league contract. Melky Cabrera and Brandon Morrow left through free agency and Juan Francisco was claimed off waivers by the Boston Red Sox. The Jays later traded Jose Reyes and pitching prospects Miguel Castro, Jeff Hoffman, and Jesus Tinoco to the Colorado Rockies for all-star shortstop Troy Tulowitzki and reliever Latroy Hawkins. 2 days later, they acquired all-star pitcher David Price from the Detroit Tigers in exchange for pitching prospects Daniel Norris, Matt Boyd, and Jairo Labort. The Jays had 2 11-game winning streaks during this season. On September 25, the Blue Jays clinched a playoff berth, ending the longest active playoff drought in North American professional sports. They subsequently claimed the AL East Division title on September 30, after defeating the Baltimore Orioles 15-2 in the first game of a doubleheader. The Blue Jays faced the Texas Rangers in the ALDS after losing back-to-back home games. They won the next 3 games in a row to take the 5-game series, advancing to the ALCS. A 3-game comeback series victory had not been accomplished since 2012 by the San Francisco Giants. During Game 5 of the series in Toronto, Blue Jays right fielder Jose Bautista executed what Andrew Kay of the New York Times described as possibly the most ostentatious bat flip in MLB history, after hitting a go-ahead 3-run home run off Rangers relief pitcher Sam Dyson. Bautista wrote an article about the bat flip published in November 2015 in the Players Tribune. The Blue Jays then faced the Kansas City Royals in the ALCS, losing the series 4-2 in Kansas City. The Royals would eventually win the World Series. After the playoffs, Donaldson was named AL MVP, becoming the first Blue Jay to win the award since George Bell in 1987. Upon the expiration of Paul Beeston's contract, Mark Shapiro replaced him as president of the Blue Jays. Alex Anthopoulos resigned 2 months after the hiring of Shapiro. Ross Atkins subsequently took his place. During the off-season, David Price left the Blue Jays through free agency, signing with the Boston Red Sox, while the Blue Jays signed J.A. Happ. On March 4, 2016, infielder Masaris Charis announced his retirement from baseball. A few weeks later, Brad Penny and Rafael Soriano, both veterans under minor league contract with the Blue Jays, retired from baseball as well. On May 15, 2016, the Blue Jays and the Texas Rangers brawled against each other in Arlington, Texas. The brawl happened when Matt Bush threw a pitch at Jose Bautista. Then Bautista made an illegal slide, and Rendodor punched Bautista. Bautista was later suspended for 1 game. On May 31, 2016, the Blue Jays traded for Jason Grilli from the Atlanta Braves. Before the non-waiver trade deadline at 4 p.m. on August 1, the Blue Jays traded for Joaquin Benoit, Melvin Upton Jr., Scott Feldman, and Francisco Liriano. On August 25, the Blue Jays reacquired popular backup catcher Dioner Navarro in a trade with the Chicago White Sox. This was done before the August 31 trade deadline, making Navarro eligible to be on the postseason roster. On October 2, the Blue Jays clinched their first wild card berth with a Detroit Tigers loss to the Atlanta Braves. On October 4, the Blue Jays defeated the Baltimore Orioles in the American League wild card game in extra innings, via a walk-off 3-run home run by Edwin Encarnacion in the bottom of the 11th inning. On October 9, the Blue Jays completed a sweep of the Texas Rangers in the American League Division Series to advance to the American League Championship Series for the second consecutive year. On October 19, the Blue Jays were eliminated from World Series contention with a 3-0 loss to the Cleveland Indians in Game 5 of the American League Championship Series. The 2020 Toronto Blue Jays season was the 44th season of the Toronto Blue Jays franchise. On March 12, MLB announced that because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in Toronto, the start of the regular season would be delayed by at least 2 weeks in addition to the remainder of spring training being cancelled. 4 days later, it was announced that the start of the season would be pushed back indefinitely due to the recommendation made by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to restrict events of more than 50 people for 8 weeks. On June 23, Commissioner Rob Manfred unilaterally implemented a 60-game season. Players were to report to training camps on July 1 in order to resume spring training and prepare for a July 23 or 24th opening day. The team was forced to play their home games in the home of their AAA affiliate in Buffalo, New York. Due to the pandemic and the shortened season, Major League Baseball instituted certain rule changes which included the use of the universal designated hitter, the runner on second base to start extra innings, and a revised schedule. On July 30, the league and the union agreed that all remaining doubleheaders on the season would be 7 innings. On September 24, the Blue Jays clinched a playoff berth for the first time since 2016, and on the next day they clinched their first winning season since 2016 as well. As the 8th seed in the expanded playoff format, they faced the top-seeded Tampa Bay Rays in one of 4 2020 American League Wild Card Series where they were swept 2-0 in the best-of-3 series.